Hello and welcome to a very special episode of First Geek 411. This week, boy, we're chatting God of War Ragnarok. And with me, as always, from West Coast, Best Coast, is Emma. How are you doing?
Hi, doing good. Finished the game in a day, accidentally, very much accidentally over Thanksgiving. I sat down Black Friday to play, and next thing I know, it was 7 p.m. and I had finished the game, and I was like, "Oops,
Oops.
didn't
Yeah,
mean to do that, but I did."
yeah. We'll get into more specifics, but that's kind of where I was with the end of the game, too. Granted, I wanted to make sure that I had finished so that we could do the spoiler cast today. But that was also like the last like 3 chapters. I was like, we got stuff to do. And
Yeah.
I was just ready to go. And so, before we get into it, we're going to do our normal what have we been up to. And then we'll give a full on spoiler warning for when we're getting into full on spoilers for God of War Ragnarok. But be prepared for that. And so, all that said, we are First Geek 411. You can find us on social media as OneGeek411. You can join our Discord server or shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. You can watch live on Twitch Monday nights, 6:45 Mountain Time. Be part of the post-show chats. This week, we're post-show chatting about the Last of Us trailer for HBO. And then you can also find the videos over on our YouTube where you can like, comment, and subscribe. And then, you can also go and check out our Redbubble store if you want any of that merch. But yeah, Emma, what have you been up to this past week?
Let's see. I finished God of War, obviously, as I have it in the post show or the show notes. God of War Riggers because I couldn't figure out how to spell Ragnarok
Tell me
because I'm
about it.
sick. So I just have it written down as Riggers.
Yeah.
Finished that. I have tactically finished my semester. I don't have any more classes. I just have one project left to finish, but that's not due for another week and a half.
Nice.
It's super easy. It just takes like 3 hours. So like I'm basically done.
Yeah, just don't put it off till the 3 hours before.
Oh yeah, no. That like the thing about it is that I have to go into campus for it because I need the school computers. So like I have to plan out the time to do it, so I can't just put it off anyway.
That's
so
good.
Regardless, it's gonna get done at some point.
Yeah. As the person that was notoriously bad for like, oh, this paper is coming up, I'll do it the night before. So
no, this is not one that I can pull that on. Fortunately, I have a lot of time. I started watching the new season of Dimension 20. It is the first time I've ever watched any Dimension 20, and it's because a friend of mine from high school was like, "Hey, they have a new season coming out. I want to watch it with you." So we watched over Zoom, and it was a lot of fun. And it's like,
I say, what is Dimension 20? I've never heard of it.
so Dimension 20 is another like D&D live play, like Critical Role, with a different group of people. A lot of the people on Dimension 20 kind of overlap with Critical Role, but like they do like shorter, typically like 10 to 20 episode campaigns, and they're all like themed, if you will.
Okay. I've seen clips of this. I was like, so
it's one of the other popular. Yeah, Brennan Lee Mulligan is.
Yeah, I've seen clips of him being a DM, and it seemed very well produced, but I never knew what the clips were from.
Yeah, so it's that, and this season is like horror fairy tale almost. So like it's all of the players are different fantasy fairy tale characters. So we've got a Snow White, or not a Snow White, Little Red Riding Hood, a Sleeping Beauty, Pinocchio, like all of these different characters, but they're like different takes on those fairy tale characters, and it's a lot of fun so far. And I'm really enjoying it, and it's like a fun, different group to like hop into D&D through, if you will. And then because it's the start of December, it's Advent, and I have a Lego Advent calendar that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Yay! Yeah.
I
So
also got this advent calendar, and I just got to say, I love the headphones that they give you for
yes,
Star-Lord. That was one of my favorite
yes,
pieces.
that's like a fun addition. And I have the little like Christmas present that you can actually put them in.
Yeah, it's so cool. I
So
love the Lego advent calendars.
yeah, this is the first time I've had anything other than like a chocolate advent
Hmm.
calendar, and it's a lot of fun to have this like get something a little like keepsake out of it that like still can be kept together and like decorated with. So
Hmm.
that's been a lot of fun, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I think one of my favorites is Rocket Raccoon. And
Yes.
he's got a little tail, and that's fun.
Yes.
So I think that's my favorite so far. And that has been my week, other than spending literally half my weekend filming.
Yeah. You told me how long you were filming, and it blew my mind.
It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 12 hours each day,
Yeah, that
which is literally
I'm shooken.
like hour wise half the weekend. The other half was spent sleeping,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But that is the nature of the industry I am in.
Yeah.
And you know what? At least I enjoyed it. So
How much of that like that 12 hours a day was like cameras rolling filming? Because like obviously you got to get there, you got to prep stuff. From your posts, you were like doing sound stuff, so like,
yeah.
but like how
So
much of it is
cameras
actually like
rolling,
recording?
I would say like 3 hours. Because a lot of it in between is like getting different setups, setting light ups, getting different rigs, getting things, moved around and all of that. So like 3 hours roughly.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
I was
four.
just really curious to how that
Yeah.
ratio worked out because it's like the
Yeah.
type of thing that like you never fully understand the amount of time that it takes to pull off
Yeah.
like creative endeavors. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people are like, you just record it and then you put it up. It's like, no,
And
if
that's the
only.
thing, those 12-hour day, you're not like I was on sound, so like I was sitting around for a lot of it because sound, like literally the call time for the majority of the crew is 9 a.m. for a filming start time of 11:30.
Hmm.
I can show up at 10:30 and have all of my stuff built and ready to go by 11 a.m. like in 30 minutes, ready to go.
Mhm.
Because sound equipment is like easy to set up. There's not a lot of it to set up. And then in between takes, I don't have anything to change really unless we're switching actors and I just need to switch out radio mics. So like in between those times I was sitting around, but like a lot of the crew was like running around trying to get lights changed out or whatever. Like
Mhm.
things are happening.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
just
yeah. It's
absolutely everyone sitting around doing nothing.
right.
So busy, busy, busy.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's the stuff of, like people on like my end of it, like we never really think of. You never think of
No.
that this like this stunt. It actually took like this like 15
Yeah.
second stunt took them an hour to film every
Yeah.
time because it takes an hour to reset the stunt and then
And it took 3 hours for this lighting setup to be
Yeah.
just right so that it looked real or whatever. Like, and then to do the same stunt from a different angle, you have to redo all of the lighting all over again to make sure it matches
Mhm.
from the previous angle you had or whatever. Like, so it's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, that's. I'm happy that you are enjoying it.
Yes.
That's the
That is the key.
yes. So for me, also been doing the Guardians of the Galaxy Lego Advent Calendar. We finally watched the Guardians Holiday Special. It was very cute.
Oh, good. Very cute.
I'm very excited for us to do our conclusion of our Phase 4 tier list. Now that all of the projects are out, we can actually go and do that and hit those last 4 or 5 things. And so, very much looking forward to that. Probably in 2023, judging by where we
Yes.
are in the year. And so, and then
The events coming up.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, we'll get it done before Ant-Man. That's all I'll say. And so, then also watched some of Wednesday. the new Addams Family spinoff. I really enjoyed what I watched. I probably Deanna watched through the whole thing, really enjoyed it. I probably caught maybe a little bit under half, just as I was like in and out, or playing Pokemon the whole time. Speaking of which, I've been playing a whole bunch of Pokemon.
A lot.
And so definitely happy to be back in. I have one gym and one Team Star camp left to go.
Is this with the new game?
Yeah, so I'm playing Violet, which is like the future themed of the games. And so I have purple cyber bicycle Pokemon versus red has wheels but still runs anyway Pokemon. So, and so that's been a ton of fun. And then I also got the platinum trophy in Sonic Frontiers. And so that was a lot of fun, but I feel like that's like my caveat every time I talk about the game. Is it's like, I really enjoyed it, but there was this other stuff that happened. And so, like to get the platinum, you have to max out your stats, which is, not crazy for a video game. But when you max out your attack and defense, you just hand over all the resources at once. But if you want to max out your speed and ring capacity, you have to manually select it every time you go to the menu. And it was just like, I posted in Good Morning Guys, and I was like, the real bad guy was the menuing we had to do along the way. Like, it was just like, it wasn't even that long of a total process. It was just the fact that you just had, like, I had enough resources. I just had to manually click it enough times to get it leveled up. And then this, I guess yesterday, actually, we went to Arcade 92, which is a barcade in the area to celebrate a friend's birthday. And so that was really fun. Played a lot of retro games, and then played some, I think it's called Killer Queen. Let me actually Google that real quick. It is a bee-themed yes, it is Killer Queen. It is a bee-themed arcade game. It's like, it's a newer game, but basically on the team, one person is the queen, and then the other people are drones. And then there's a couple different ways of playing the game or of winning the game. And so the victories are military, which is you kill the opposing queen a certain number of times. Economic, which is the drones collect enough resources, or snail, which is there's a snail on the map and it's basically a tug of war. And if you can move the snail all the way to your side, you win. So
that is great.
And then the final thing that I did was beat God of War Ragnarok. I guess not in terms of timeline, but it's the final thing to bring up. I've also done a bit of the post-game stuff, and I've kind of looked up some of the stuff that I haven't gotten to yet, just so that we could talk about it. But yeah, with that, listeners, hit us up with what you have been up to, and you can do that over in the Discord. So with that, let's get into our topic of the show, which is our God of War Ragnarok Spoilercast. This game, released by Santa Monica Studios, comes as a sequel to the critically acclaimed God of War 2018. And then Fimbulwinter is well underway. Kratos and Atreus must journey to each of the 9 realms in search of answers as Asgardian forces prepare for the prophesied battle that will end the world. Along the way, they will explore stunning, mystical landscapes and face fearsome enemies in the form of Norse gods and monsters. The threat of Ragnarok grows ever closer. Kratos and Atreus, I don't know why I'm struggling to say it so much right now, must choose between their own safety and the safety of the realms.
Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun.
So with that, in Twitch chat, play along with these questions as you like. But 2-sentence summary. Emma, what did you think of the game? Oh, actually, sorry, pause. From this point on, full spoilers for the God of War series. The previous blurb was just the PlayStation Store description. So That is like the marketing explanation of what's
That
going
does
on.
not include really spoilers.
Yes. Yeah. I'm surprised. Kratos and Atreus are here. I bet you never saw that coming.
Oh no!
And
You
so
go into the main characters of this franchise game are.
I'm so sorry, Emma. I have
How
let you
dare
down.
you.
But yeah, so from here on, full spoilers for the whole God of War franchise, but especially God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok. And so yeah, just be aware. Okay, 2-sentence summary, Emma.
2-sentence summary, in my opinion. I am in the minority and do not think the story is very hype worthy. Because I've seen the studio do better.
Oh, interesting.
And that's coming from someone who tells stories for a living, so I know the kinds of things studios can do. That is my 2-sentence summary.
Okay, my 2-sentence summary. In refute. No, I'm just kidding. This is honestly one of the reasons I'm excited for us to talk about it. And so for me, I loved this game. I feel like it captured a lot of the growth that was in the previous game. I'm a big sucker for story games that it feels like they've actually grown as characters. We talked about this a little bit, I think, in was it episode 223, raising my hands so that I can scrub and find this later. We talked about that a little bit there. It's like some time has passed, so it's clear that the characters have developed, but not too much. This is a very long run-on sentence. But I loved that, and then I love where we got to see the characters go. I'm very excited to kind of get to talk through a bit of that together.
Yeah.
Very long 2 sentences, but
very long 2 sentences. I definitely think the character growth is great, and like that was fantastic. But this is like, I've mentioned this already previously, but I didn't feel like the different sections of the story were coherent throughout. And that's something that really bugged me, is that like I didn't, like, in the first 30 minutes of the game understand, okay, what it is. Like, it didn't feel like there was a coherent goal going that was given to us at the start of the game that was like, okay, we're like, basically the end game goal of trying to stop Odin from stopping Ragnarok or whatever, like, wasn't present at the start of the game. It was like, we're gonna wander off and find answers for Atreus. Okay, great, I'm down for that. And like, that's gonna help with the character development and the relationships and all of that. But then it changes halfway through to like trying to stop Odin from stopping Ragnarok or whatever, and I was like, but I thought we were just looking for answers. Like, I feel like they needed to, kind of like the problem with the Doctor Strange movie. They needed to either go horror or go whatever the time thing was. Like, I feel like they kind of fell into the same problem that the Doctor Strange movie did, of like, you know, great concepts, great character development, all of that, but like they were trying to go in too many different directions all at once. And they needed to either, honestly, they could have rearranged some of the sections to happen earlier in the game and it would have made it all perfect. Like, there were just some things that were like, okay, if you could have brought in elements of Odin trying to stop Ragnarok, or like trying to stop Odin much earlier in the game, so that thread of it was present from the start of the game, then great. Like, I wouldn't have had any problems with the storyline at all. Because it's all there. They have it all. It's just the way it was organized was not strong enough for me to feel like I knew what the whole goal was, so that I could focus on that journey with the characters.
So I'll say for me, like, 100% seeing where you're coming from. That's kind of what I liked about it. Like,
Interesting.
I like Kratos as this reluctant hero. that like is try like to your point, basically the first half of the game is Kratos doing whatever he can to not get involved in Ragnarok. He doesn't want any part of this. He just wants to kind of go through his life, and up until the end of the section with Freya, he doesn't really care. Like he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his son, but that's kind of the end of his quest. And up until a certain point, he sees protecting Atreus as not getting involved. He's not willing to like make promises to anyone that he won't get involved, but he also is not wanting to do that. And I kind of like that for like as a character arc of the almost
That's
that like that that like reluctant hero of like Kratos, this is what needs to be what's going to end up needing to be done. And I think we as fans very much see that before he does, or accept that before he does. Maybe that's another way to say it. But then when it actually comes to like the execution, it's very interesting to see how, to your point, how much time we spend trying to run away from being involved.
Yeah. I like absolutely, and I love that about Kratos's story arc. I just think like even like I mean there's a question about it later on, but like the Tyr Odin twist, like even if that had happened earlier, because you spend so much time early game going to rescue Tyr from Odin, if that reveal had happened earlier in the game and then still had Kratos struggling to like not want to get involved with the whole Odin thing, like even that just then, or even like actually hinted at Tyr being Odin or whatever, like earlier on, like that would have felt the last third, or made the last third of the game feel a bit more like, okay, like I can see how we connected the arc of the first half to the arc of the second half in a more coherent. It just didn't feel like the two halves were like fit in the same game. It felt like they should have been separate games because they were like, yes, like they both connect, but they didn't like feel like part of the same storyline that should have been fit into one game.
So I have a follow-up question on this. Did you feel that way about the first game?
No.
See, okay, and the reason I asked this is because I felt that way about the first game. And I still loved the story and I still loved all of that. And so again, this is one of the reasons I'm excited that we're chatting, because we have different perspectives. Is that for me, this game felt way more self-contained. Like,
interesting.
And it felt like, again, with the reluctant hero type arc, it felt way more, this is the thing that's going on, where there was so much stuff in God of War 2018 that was like, you're going to really tell me that we're going to go through all of this because Kratos doesn't want to just find another way around this slight inconvenience. And we're going to go to these other realms. There's a bit more of that. It was more like gamified, where it was like there's one scene where you're trying to cross like a ravine, or like it's like the mountain spike thing that you're trying to like walk across. And so up to where you find Mimir in the first game. And it's like, oh, it's all smoky. You have to go find the light of Alfheim to get through. And it's just like, you're good. Like that, again, loved that game. Fantastic. 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But to me, that kind of stuff was more like, oh, we're padding the runtime, compared to this one where I felt like this felt way more cohesive. And we'll talk more about the Tyr Odin stuff a bit later on. But like, again, I think that that's super interesting that we kind of have inverse perspectives there.
Well, I think the big thing with the first, I say first game. When I say first game, I mean the 2018 game. I think the thing with that one for me is that like the big picture goal was there from the beginning to take the ashes to the top of the highest peak and spread them. Like we were given that in the first 10 minutes. And yes, it is gamified, and like I'm totally with you there. Like, okay, we're adding padding time of doing these random little things to make the game longer. But I knew going in, like, this is the journey we're going to take. And then all of the little, like, things that happened in the actual story throughout, like, come as surprises, and then you've got the additional, plot line of Balder that happens that kind of hinders them from just doing their thing in a day and going back home. Whereas this, it didn't feel like seeing that and like going through that and being given that like your goal is to do this from the start of the game, and then we're gonna like try and make it more difficult for you by throwing this, you know, guy at you that can never die, like literally.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel cohesive, knowing and having played through the 2018 one of like, I need to do this thing that was given to me at the start of the game and get it done because I have this special relationship with my wife who for once I did not kill, like, so yeah.
We'll dig into all that a bit more. Let's go through some very high level like bullet point summary. So this is all coming from Wikipedia. I'm not going to read the whole story summary, just kind of hit the main points. Emma, if you want to stop me along the way, please feel free, jump in. Then we'll kind of talk through a bit more of the story as we get going. Or I may come up with questions as we go through. So the start of the game, we have a somewhat similar setup to the beginning of the first game. We have Kratos and Atreus back home at their cabin that's somehow still in the middle of nowhere. But surprise, it's Fimbulwinter. And so they are out hunting, and then they come back and Fenrir dies. Not real Fenrir, well, kind of real Fenrir, but just a normal wolf Fenrir dies. We find out later that Atreus is able to do some magic that he was not aware of, and he's actually able to transfer Fenrir's soul into his knife. So that's interesting.
Knife. No.
What do you have there?
A knife. No.
And then
sorry, I had to make that reference.
A+. We also find out that Atreus is starting to get some uncontrollable shape-shifting magic as he shapeshifts into a bear. And so upon returning back, we get the scene from the end of God of War 2018 where Thor shows up at the house, but surprise, Odin is there too.
Who are you?
Yeah. I love Mjolnir in this as well. I like their design. I like that Thor is also left-handed.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, Thor is a lefty, and it was an intentional choice because it was supposed to demonstrate like Kratos being out of his element. Because every time you've run at and attacked other characters, it's always doing the like side-by-side thing. But with Mjolnir versus the axe, they wanted them like colliding.
That's cool.
And so, since they're both made by Brock and Sindri, that was kind of like the parallel there.
Yeah.
So Odin wants Kratos to agree to stay out of Ragnarok, promises to give them information about Loki if he will. Kratos refuses, and then he fights Thor. At some point in the fight, Thor kills you, and then jumpstarts your heart with Mjolnir because you die. Yeah, I loved that.
I wish they'd done a little bit more of that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted a little more of that, even if they just kept it to Thor. Like, that would have been great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene. And the "you die when I say you die."
Yeah.
And so Kratos and Atreus end up going and hiding. They end up at Yggdrasil with the dwarfs because that's a place that Odin cannot get. And so we find out that Atreus has been re-examining the giant shrines, and that he has found out that through giant magic, you can actually enter the shrines and kind of get a more detailed vision of what's going on. And so we find out sneaky sneaks have been happening. I think it's here that we play as Atreus for the first time as well. So that's exciting. And then you end up fighting your way to rescue Tyr. And so, again, wanting to prevent Ragnarok. And so you go and you rescue Tyr. Some bad stuff happens along the way. You got some fighting to do. We find out that Tyr is now a pacifist. And so that is something. And then you eventually make it back. And Kratos and Atreus end up having a fight. And Atreus is able to again use giant magic to travel to Jotunheim, where he meets up with Agrabota, who is.
Wanted more of her.
I did too. This is one thing.
So much more of her.
Yeah, I'm glad that she showed
great.
Back up towards the end, but I still wanted more of her. That I was really sad when this section ended.
Yeah, I feel like she could have been a carrier for a lot of the. Like, again, I thought this game was great overall, but like, so I'm being nitpicky about all of the things I'm being nitpicky about, and I feel like she could have been. Like, I wanted more of her, and I feel like they could have easily used her to, like, be, like, a carrier for a lot of those things that I personally struggled with. Yeah. Because she had connections to prophecies and everything.
I definitely agree. And I love that when they meet, so Agrabota has the ability of prophecy, as Emma was saying, and so she's able to, like, paint the murals or the shrines. And we find out, or when they meet, she's painting her and Atreus meeting. And I thought that was a really cool touch. And so through all of this, we find out that the giants have trapped their souls in these stones in order to evade Odin. And so, and then Atreus takes one of those souls and puts it into a snake that then starts growing rapidly in size.
Oh no!
I can't imagine what this is. And so, which I did love. I loved that they kind of the twist on the world serpent being a child of Loki. And it's not like a biological child. It is, he kind of brings them in. I thought that it was such a cool twist. Twist on that, not a twist from a storytelling twist perspective.
Like a different take on it.
Yes, yeah, that's a better way to say it. And then all this happens. Eventually, Atreus ends up back in Midgard, where he and Kratos meet up. Then they get attacked by Valkyrie Freya, which is the coolest outfit in the game. I loved her. I loved her Valkyrie armor. And so we then find out that, or we learned in the previous game that Freya cannot leave Midgard because of a curse set on her by Odin. And then through this, she gets Kratos to agree to help her to break the curse. And so they end up fighting Nidhogg to break the curse and kind of have this quest to go and free her from Odin fully. As Ragnarok has happened, his magic has grown weaker, and that has made it so she is able to break the curse. And then I like this line from the wiki. Freya admits that she could never forgive Kratos for killing her son, nor kill him in return. The two make amends. And I like this, like, that resolution to their arc of, like, I'm not going to try to kill you, but I cannot let this go.
Yeah.
And so when Kratos and Freya return to Yggdrasil, they have a fight with Atreus, or Kratos fights with Atreus, and that ends up with him fleeing to Asgard. Fulfilling.
I remember that one. I think we played different games.
Yeah, and then so Atreus ends up fleeing to Asgard, fulfilling the prophecy to an extent. We meet Heimdall, who is the biggest tool ever.
Oh yeah.
And gets what's coming. And we then re-meet Thor and Odin, as well as start to meet more of Thor's family, being Sif and Throde. And then at this point, Kratos, Freya, and Mimir also go to meet the Norns, which are the fates of the Norse mythology. Through this, they they find out that Heimdall is destined to kill Atreus, which Kratos cannot let stand. And this is kind of, to what Emma was saying earlier, this is kind of that turning point where we go from Kratos not wanting to be involved to, okay, well, you're going to make me do this. And so through this, we get a new weapon, the Draupnir Spear, because that can bypass Heimdall's foresight. While this is going on, Atreus is on a mission from...
For whatever reason, I still don't fully understand.
Why it can get past his foresight?
Yeah.
So, my understanding, which admittedly could be wrong, someone in chat can jump in and correct if there's a canonical answer for this. My understanding was, since Draupnir can like self-replicate, it was so unknowable when that would happen that Heimdall couldn't Heimdall couldn't understand that. Like, he couldn't foresee all of the possibilities. That was my understanding. It still seems like you're throwing a spear at the guy. Like, I don't know. Like, I will definitely agree with you that I think I understood what it was saying, but not like the practical side of it.
Yeah, like, all right. Not sure that's entirely how it works, but yeah, I'll just go with it.
Yeah, it happened.
Like, and a lot of my complaints at this point are just me being a bit nitpicky.
Yeah. Let's see. So Atreus goes off and is trying to complete this mask for Odin that has very simple riddles that I really feel like Odin could have figured out if he tried, but that's neither here nor there. And during this, Atreus accidentally frees the wolf Garm, and then puts Fenrir's soul into Garm, which now creates giant wolf Fenrir that we know from Norse mythology. And so stuff happens there. We also go to Vanaheim to rescue Freyr, who is Freya's brother. They did not try very hard in that name. Norse mythology writers, I see you. I
gotta talk to the historical figures on that one.
Yeah,
Cameron.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the Norse mythology writers, I'm just saying, you could have tried a little bit harder.
Travel back in time to file that complaint.
Yeah. And so Freyr gets captured, and in the attempts to go and rescue them, Kratos has to kill Heimdall. And Heimdall does not let Kratos let him live, which I think is an interesting bit of foresight. Or lack thereof on Heimdall's part. He cannot accept the sympathy. And so from there, Atreus finishes the mask. They find the one missing piece with the help of Thor, and then Atreus gives the mask to Tyr, who has finally agreed to give up his pacifistic ways. And then Brock becomes suspicious of Tyr's change of heart, calls him out on it, and has realized that Tyr has suddenly switched to calling Atreus Loki, which prompts Tyr to then stab Brock, killing him. And then Tyr reveals that he has been Loki, or he has been Odin the whole time in disguise. And so they end up driving Odin away. They retrieve the mask. And then from there, we're full on Ragnarok, ready to go. We enter the gathering the forces kind of thing. So we go to get Surtur so that we can have giant fire monster to destroy Asgard. We go and assemble all the troops, all of those kinds of things. We get all of the Valkyries from the 2018 game now back in like a corporal form. I was like, let's go. Valkyries are the best. And under Kratos' leadership, they launch an attack on Asgard, and then find out that they actually have to kind of slow Ragnarok down now that they started it, which I thought was a funny twist because Odin has brought civilians to kind of protect him. And so the World Serpent shows up. We got full-on armies fighting. It's pure chaos. Through all of this, we fight Thor again. And then at the last minute, we have a heart-to-heart with the help of Thrud. Thor agrees to step down, and then Odin murders him. And then that kind of leads into this final fight against Odin. Atreus is able to trap the... in the end, Atreus is able to trap Odin's soul in one of the marbles. And just when the party has decided, you know what, maybe we could let him live, and we don't need this revenge, Sindri shows up and smashes that thing, and it's the best moment ever.
Yes.
I was gonna be so upset if they let Odin live. Like that's just like the type of thing that you're like, you're just asking for bad things to happen.
Yeah.
And so with that
was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah. With that, Surtur completes Ragnarok. Freyr dies. And then we get this epilogue where we find out that Atreus has to go off and find the surviving giants and bids farewell. And then that's when...
Of his own accord.
Yes.
Like the have to
yes.
is there. Of
he wants to.
He wants to.
Yeah, great clarification.
He's not required to,
yes.
but he wants to.
Yes, this is something he feels he has to do. It's not something that's being thrust upon him.
And he wants to do it on his own.
Yes. Which is then what leaves us in the end game with Kratos, Freya, and Mimir completing the stuff that has not been completed. There is also some actual story that takes place in the post game. You fight the new Valkyrie Queen, and then there's also a side story with Thrud, and then there's also one with the real Tyr, who you can actually go and free now as well.
Nice.
And so
we love that.
But that is our high points of the story. Emma, we've kind of already weaved these in and out through our other conversations, but what was your favorite part of the game? Can be a specific thing. Sorry, let's keep it story related for now. What is your favorite part of the game? What was your least favorite part?
I think most favorite part was the part with Agrabota, because it was nice. It was one of the first times that you play as Atreus, but it was also nice. So you like got to see him like doing his own thing, but it was nice to see like a callback to past things from the previous game that we like knew, but in a way that expands on future things, and it's Atreus like trying to figure out who he is, and it's this fun, unique character of Agrabota as well that is like, not a wild child, but like a wild spirit, like a very like kind of like matches the energy of Atreus in a way that we haven't really gotten to see him have a friendship like that before.
Yeah.
And I wanted a whole lot more of that, of just like.
Did you read the journal any? Like as you would meet new characters and like the codex would update?
A little bit here and there. I don't think I was at that point.
Okay. So one of my favorite things, and this comes up with Agrabota, it comes up two more times with the Midgardian boy and with Thrud, of Atreus is always like, I met someone and they're my own age. Yes. And I loved that for him. I was like...
No, definitely I got that with the Midgardian guy and Thrud, and I was just like, oh, I love that. Like, he's just so happy to meet other kids.
He's just like, I'm not stuck with my dad all the time. Like, I get to meet people. He was just so happy. And, like, that idea of, like, matching energy and having someone that, like, you could talk to.
Yeah, and who had, like, similar, like, power sets or not, like, life experiences, but, like, just a similar background as him was fun. And, like, I wanted more, because... like, Thrud is kind of set up as the love interest for Atreus in many ways. At least in terms of how I interpret it. Which was, like, great and fun. Like, it's, he's a kid, young, growing adult, teenager, whatever you want to call him. I don't know how aging works in this game. He's at that point where relationships start to be a part of life. And whatever, but then... like, you meet Agrabota first, and it's the first time we get to see him create a friendship with someone other than his father.
Yeah.
So that was my favorite part. Are we doing least favorite as well?
I'll do my favorite part, and then we can do least favorites. So my favorite part, I loved the Norns. I think we discussed this previous episode in post-show chat or in
That was the
post
one I couldn't remember.
online chat.
But that's some of my other favorite
yeah.
part.
And so that was Kratos, Freya, and Mimir meeting the Norns. And I loved the kind of the twist is that there is no twist. That like there is no fate, people are just predictable. And I really liked that. Like this, like up until that point, Kratos kind of has this idea that like because of the things that have happened in previous games, he can break fate.
Yeah,
he's able to do this.
There is no joke.
Right, exactly. And I loved that. I loved this like twist is maybe a bit wrong, but like circumventing expectations is another way to say it. Of saying this isn't a
wonderfully done scene as well. Like,
yeah, it's so cool.
I about that scene a whole lot.
And like getting the various Norns, they each kind of have their thing, and one of them is like saying what Kratos is going to, or what the party is going to say before they say it. And so like at one point they're like he resists the urge to grunt, and then he grunts, and then the Norn says, "But he failed." And like stuff like that of it's again, there's no fate. You're just predictable.
Yeah.
And
that whole scene for me like is a great example of like this just made me think of this is that God of War Ragnarok is an example of great writing that just needed to be organized a little better. Like it's all fantastic, beautiful writing. It just needed to be organized a little better, in my humble opinion. And that scene with the face is a great example of that. Beautifully written, beautifully like executed. The camera work, the environment design, like all of it is just great. And like that's one of the few pieces that I feel happened exactly when it needed to in the game. A lot of the scenes and a lot of the other events in the game greatly like fantastically done acting wise, written wise, whatever, but like they didn't feel like they happened at the right time. But that's one of the few that I'm like, yeah, this thing is happening when it needs to happen in the character story arc. And I love that whole event. So
okay. Least favorite part.
Goes with my next one, or the next question, or next two questions. I don't understand the squirrel. I don't understand the squirrel. What was the point of introducing the squirrel as though he were an important character, and then him just not being an important character?
So, I have this really weird touch point on Norse mythology because it mainly comes from God of War 2018, MCU, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and the Magic the Gathering Kaldheim set. Like that is my touch point for Norse mythology. So I knew about the squirrel through the Magic set because there is a card that is a reference to Radagast, right, is the name of the squirrel?
Right.
Ratatoskir is the name of the squirrel. And so there's a Magic card that is a reference. That's a legendary squirrel because there is this legendary squirrel in Norse mythology. So I loved it as this like callback of like, why is this squirrel here? Well, we're in Yggdrasil, and in Norse mythology, there is this squirrel that takes care of the tree.
Right. Which is great, and I love that. But the way they introduced him was this whole like dedicated cutscene, which implied that he was gonna have an important role. They could have just had one of the dwarves go, "Oh yeah, there's this guy outside who wants to talk to you for a second." Great, you go outside and there's a random squirrel there, and like introduce him that way, and it's like, okay, he's gonna give you a side quest now. But like, the way they introduced him was just like, okay, you're setting this guy up to be an important character, and then he's not. So now I'm just sitting here confused for the rest of the game as to what it is he's supposed to be doing, which is nothing. So that's my least favorite part. Is
Yeah, he's kind of the vehicle for side quests after you beat Nidhogg. Like that's basically the gist of it. Is defeating Nidhogg messes things up, which was what Odin was going for. Surprise, he's the worst. And then because the tree is now messed up, Ratatoskir is trying to get you to help fix the tree. And so yeah, he very much just becomes that vehicle for side quests and doesn't have any other like great story moments.
Yeah.
But
so that's like my one thing is
yeah.
This is all coming down to be me being nitpicky about things as someone who's in the film industry of creating stories of like the way you introduce this character gives the audience a different impression, or at least me as the audience a different impression than is intended. And I spent the rest of the game confused about it. So the character is great. The squirrel is fantastic. Fun character overall, but just confusing in terms of I wasn't clear how to interpret his role in the game.
Yeah. Kind of, it's funny you say all this because my least favorite part also ties in with our next two questions, or next set of questions, which is looking at the characters. So I really didn't like Freyr and his crew. Like, I just like didn't find them interesting. Like, I felt that like there's the light elf and dark elf couple that I just felt were very tropey.
Yeah.
Like it's very like Romeo and Juliet of like she's a dark elf, he's a light elf, and people didn't like them being together. And
he was a boy, she was a girl.
Yeah.
Can't make it any more obvious.
Yeah. And like there's a scene where there's one of the people in that party is a traveler, which is like the big sword people.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where he essentially sacrifices himself to save the party and save Freyr. But surprise, he's not dead. And I'm like, oh, cool. I need to go rescue him because that will be helpful for the rest of the game. And then he just never shows up again.
I spent a good part of Black Friday doing as
Yeah.
well. 'Cause I had a very similar thought process going, I need to go save the guy because he's going to help me in the game.
Exactly. I was like,
Didn't show up.
this guy survived a fall from the sky.
I see how it is.
Yeah. And so, so overall, that section, a lot of the Freyr sections felt a little rough for me. I liked Freyr as a character, especially as the foil for Freya, of them very much being, she's the planner, he's the fly by the seat of your pants, and then their sibling conflict is derived from that conflict. But the
Different
rest of his
types.
Yeah, like the rest of his crew, I just didn't really care about. Like I tried to like do a lot of the story for them. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll connect with them, Kitty.
I finally caught him.
But like, I don't know. I just never really connected with them. And so with that actually transitioning into some of these questions, what did you think of the characters overall? Some favorite characters, some least favorite characters. And then did anyone stand out?
Big fan of Agrabota. I want more of her.
Yeah.
Just overall.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we know, or they've said that there's not going to be a Norse God of War Part 3. That this was a 2-game story. But I'm really hoping whatever they do after this, Agrabota shows up.
Characters coming back.
Like, yeah.
Even if it doesn't focus on Norse mythology, we get reoccurring characters.
Exactly.
Because obviously at this point, having, characters overlap into different mythological sources is viable within this universe.
Right.
Kratos is a living example of that.
Yeah. I agree with you. I liked Agrabota a lot. Amazingly well done character.
Yeah.
For me, I really liked where they went with Freya for this one. I referenced it when we were talking through the story, but I love Valkyrie Queen Freya. Of like in the first game, we kind of get hints of that about her being very powerful. We don't really get to see it. And then in this game, we kind of find out that she spent 3 years trying to hunt Kratos down. Yeah. And like, while she's been failing, like Kratos' shield's messed up. He's very battle worn. Like they're trying to do basically everything they can to keep Freya out.
And it's a daily routine at
exactly.
this point. Like, bam, bam, bam. Oh, she's back.
Yeah. And so I love that we get to see her in that conflict. And then through that, we then get to see her with her conflict with Odin, of trying to free herself from the magic that he has on her, and trying to get out of that. And I really like where they went with her from that perspective. And then I really liked Thrud, Thor's daughter, who does end up with Mjolnir. So that's another one that whatever they do for the next game, I really hope we get more references to her being, like the mighty Thor.
Essentially.
That's really where I want to see them go with that character.
Again, like it's an overlap in mythology is not out of the question here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's already rumors cycling around on the internet that like Kratos becomes the Norse god of war. Like he fills in that role.
Yeah. But on that, I really like this idea of Kratos just accidentally becoming the god of war in all of these cultures.
He's like trying to run away from it, and every time it's just like, how am I here?
Yeah.
Least favorite character. I mean, this just honestly goes back to the frickin' squirrel. I don't understand the squirrel. I do, but I don't. And it's just like, funny character, but it just feels like, and yes, it fits in with the mythology, but it just feels out of place with the rest of the characters. I don't understand the squirrel.
Yeah.
The grandma.
Oh yeah, Agraboda's grandma.
I'm very neutral on the grandma. It was fun combat, but
I liked that we actually got to see a giant.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's kind of one of their points, is that, like, giant doesn't mean you're multi-stories tall. Like, in chat, Chunk says, I really liked this version of Thor. I did, too. I liked that he's very, like, beaten down by Odin.
It was a great parallel between, like, of Thor and Kratos and Atreus and Thrud.
Yeah.
And their relationships.
Yeah, I really liked this this version of Thor. I like that he is like that to what you just said. I really like that he and Kratos are both in the struggling to be a good dad thing. And you also then get Thor struggling with this like parent dynamic to Odin, or with him as the child of Odin, but struggling with that dynamic, and trying to figure out.
He experiences coming from Odin, he then reflects onto Thrud as being her dad.
Yeah.
Like, it's that generational thing that is very real, and we see a lot in, everyday life of, like, he experiences these things with Odin putting him down, and so he, like, vents that in many ways as a father figure to Thrud, of having a drinking problem, and all of this other stuff that, like, comes out to hurt his family.
Yeah, I really liked it. I like that they didn't make Thor unredeemable, but they weren't trying to like Zuko him. Like, that was one of the things I was wondering, kind of as I was playing through the game. I was like, at some point, is Thor going to betray Odin? Like, is that going to be the vessel for some part of the plot? And I'm kind of glad that we never went there. That, like, sure, in the end, Thor kind of comes around, but he doesn't ever fight against Odin in a serious way. And I liked that. I liked that it was it wasn't the like, oh, we beat the bad guy and now he's on our team.
Yeah.
So,
We've convinced him to join us.
yeah. What else? Oh, what did you think of the Fae flashbacks? We finally get to meet Thor's wife and Atreus's mother. Meet in air quotes, I guess, is the. But basically, what is happening is Kratos is having dreams of her. Seemingly, this is some of her magic that is somehow causing these to happen. It's kind of the vibe that I got. Like, this isn't. Yeah, this isn't just like him having random dreams. It is specifically some sort of magic in the world causing these to appear. I don't know if that's correct, but that's the vibe that I got. Because there's some line that he says about it. And maybe it's the general, it felt like she was trying to send a message or something, but maybe I'm taking that a little too literally. But what did you think of this? And specifically, what did you think of this being Deborah Ann Wall?
Who is, I don't know who.
So she's Karen from Daredevil.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I was so psyched when she showed up.
That's cool.
Yeah, I had no clue that she was in this. I was so happy when this character showed up, and I was like, wait, is that Deborah Ann Wall? And then sure enough, it was. Yeah.
It's cool, first of all.
I was so
Second
excited.
of all, I think it was in terms of my interpretation of it, it felt to me more like Kratos going to himself, what would Faye say? Like, him, sort of going through, trying to imagine what this person would say that he cares a lot about, and who he in the past would go to for advice. And that may have or could easily then be influenced by magic in the world, of sort of feeding off of that, him quote unquote having someone to talk to.
Yeah.
As a guy who doesn't talk very much.
Right.
Who can sort of read his mind in a sense, and be able to give him words of wisdom without being scared off by him.
Yeah.
So it was kind of enjoyable to have that an insight into the character that was very personal and sort of separate from everything else, that you spend all of this time in the first game, quote unquote, in the 2018 God of War, going on this whole journey to spread her ashes for a character, that we never meet, but clearly there's a close, heartfelt relationship there. And then you get to see a bit of that, it doesn't feel overdone. It feels like a good sort of sprinkled throughout of her, him sort of going through that personal experience of what, how would, Faye approach this scenario if she were still here.
Yeah, definitely agree. I don't want to say complaints from the first game, but one of the things that is so weird to me about the first game is that Kratos is still kind of unlovable in that game. And you don't really get the vibe for who this mother is and why they seemingly have a happy marriage, based on the first game. And so here I really liked that we got to see a bit more of that dynamic between them. I wish we would have gotten to see them meet the first time. That was one of my because when they first come together, or we first see them, they're already dating. I think it is. They're dating, and then the second flashback is the birth of Atreus, and then the third flashback is preparing for Faye's death. And so, I wish we could have gotten to them meeting things, because I wanted to see awkward Kratos falling in love. And
Absolutely would love some of that, like,
yeah,
because he's such a serious man.
yeah. I'm hoping if we get DLC, that's one of the things I would love for us to get in the DLC. Is
Santa Monica Studios.
yeah, I'm just
You
saying.
know, you've heard it here.
Yes, I want that so much. Again, I want
Kratos dating
or
simulator.
yeah, I would say or give me like a spin-off game that's a Kratos dating simulator with him and
It
Faye.
could really be like an 8-hour game. We don't need much.
He
Like,
he just says
yeah.
That's just like the response to everything.
Mm.
Tell me about yourself.
Mm.
No. And so
All right, I'm gonna talk about my day then.
yeah.
So I went hunting and I found a deer.
And by the way, I'm pregnant.
Yeah. And he's yours. I'm gonna name him Atreus.
I'm gonna name him Loki. I want to see the fight over the name Atreus
Yeah.
versus Loki. That's one of the things I want to see.
Yeah.
And so then you referenced this towards the beginning, but what did you think of the Tyr being Odin twist? Is that something that you saw coming? Because apparently there are a lot of hints throughout the game that Tyr is actually Odin.
Really? I mean, obviously, I must have missed him then. Because I was a bit surprised. Not so much in the sense of like, oh, he was Odin this whole time, so much as like, oh, so we're going into Endgame now.
Yeah.
Like, like this is something that's happening very like this 100% feels like we're just jumping. We need an excuse to jump right into Ragnarok. So like, I guess at least for me because I missed a lot of those hint droppings, like even just having something slightly more, I don't want to say more obvious because you don't want to just straight up give it away too early, but like even just a line that's like, oh, that seemed a bit too easy in reference to rescuing Tyr. Like, sort of planting something in the player's mind of like, is this like, just like, Freya or someone questioning like, didn't that feel too easy to you guys? Or, something to be like, getting the player thinking like, yeah, that was too easy. Getting Tyr from Odin. And like, yes, there is a whole thing of Odin like not caring if Tyr was rescued or not, but like I did not connect that to him being Tyr. Because like, why would I?
Yeah. So I also completely missed all of it. And was shocked that Tyr was Odin. I was in Brock's camp of like Tyr is acting very weird.
Yeah.
Like that
in that whole scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also was absolutely like, you're weird. Stop being weird.
Like I actually felt seen by the developers when Brock comes in. And I was like, because I was in the camp that Tyr was being strange and everyone was just kind of okay with it. And then Brock shows up, calls him out. And then I went flip-flopped into the Brock is going really hard on Tyr. I don't think Tyr deserves it. And then Tyr stabbed him and revealed that he was Odin.
Yeah, no, like but that like absolutely same page, but that was all over the course of one scene.
Right.
Like it was all one scene. And where I was also just like, Tyr, you're being a bit of a like you haven't acted this way until now.
Yeah.
And then, 5 minutes later,
surprise, is Odin.
Surprise! And now we are in the last quarter of the game, and you're going to finish the game in the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So it's just like, you could have like changed his behavior slowly a bit
Yeah. So this is
earlier.
one I'm hoping that once we get through like kind of the no spoiler season for this game, I'm hoping that we see a lot of videos on the like every reference that Tyr was Odin, that kind of thing. Because I was listening to another podcast and one of them was talking about how they've already started going back to replay it. And they were like, if you know that Tyr is Odin, it is painfully obvious that he is Odin the whole time.
Yeah. Which
Like,
might be one of, the setbacks that they had in developing that. Because that's, again, this goes back to, me being in the industry of telling stories. Like, you see this a lot with like directors and or editors where you know the storyline so well and you know the plot and the characters so well that you just do not see or miss things
mm-hmm.
that because you just know, like, in that whole time leading up to that, it's likely it was just something that as the story writers and the editors or whoever, like, they just knew, so they didn't see that like the hints that they were giving were just like um too subtle to tell the audience on a first playthrough that this character is really that character. So like it might have just been something that like they didn't realize in the development of the game because they just knew. So they couldn't fix it. Or on the flip side, they wanted to be super subtle. And if that were the case,
Mm-hmm.
great job. 10 out of 10 for being subtle.
Um, yeah, so I love this. Chunk said I was totally floored, and I think that this is uh, very much that setup to then escalate things. And you referenced that earlier. It is the okay, well, we now have the things, we have to do this, um, and we now have to actually go through and go and cause Ragnarok. So then, tied in with the final story question that I got, were you surprised that Kratos lived?
We've talked about this. This was one of the things I think we talked about through Twitter or somewhere. We've talked about it at some point about the whole like fates
Mm-hmm.
thing where the whole concept of knowing your fate will then lead you to try to prevent your fate, which will then inevitably lead you to causing your fate or whatever. That whole like trope is done enough in fiction that like I personally felt like when you're given at towards the start of the game that Kratos is gonna die in Atreus's arms, that like I was just like, you know what, it's gonna go either way. Like it could go where he does die, and it could go where he doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've seen it done both ways enough times in fiction at this point, within that trope, that like it's just whatever's gonna happen happens. Because
Mm-hmm.
like you can say this character's gonna die at the end of the game through fate, and then they don't die. It turns out to be a different character. We've seen that before, essentially. Like, I didn't want Kratos to die, personally. Like, I wanted it to go the route where he doesn't die, because I liked playing as Kratos. He's a great
Mm-hmm.
character, especially with the growth that they were indicating and giving him and all of that. But at the same time, if he had died, then it would have been like, okay, like you guys told us at the start of the game he was gonna die. But it also like this trope has been done enough that like if he doesn't die, I also wouldn't have been very surprised. And I wasn't. I wasn't very surprised that he did not die, because that whole trope in terms of fate and knowing your death
Mm-hmm.
has been done enough that like the two options of dying and not dying are just like moot points.
Yeah. Um, and so chat chunk says, "I'm glad he's alive." So I'm glad he's alive. I liked playing as Kratos way more than Atreus. We'll talk a bit more about playing as Atreus in the next section on gameplay, but um, I'll say I went full like roller coaster on this one. Like I went into the game being like, okay, there's no way Kratos lives. Or sorry, I went into the game saying there's no way Kratos dies. They're going to circumvent fate somehow. Um, or we're going to find out that this event is just farther off and the prophecy wasn't about Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Kratos could still die in Atreus'
That's
arms.
also like, you know,
Like,
a feasible thing, you know?
right. Like, Kratos could die in Atreus' arms 100 years from now. Like,
Yeah.
there's no, like... so that's where I started. And then when Atreus shows up and the first time you play as him, I literally said out loud, they did it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we were anticipating that you'd play as Atreus in some way. And so once that happened, I was like, Kratos is so dead. We're doing post-game stuff as Atreus.
Yeah.
And then through the stuff with the fates, through the constant batting down of be better, all of those things. And then with the final thing where Kratos is telling the story to Atreus in the tent, I was like, he is so safe. He's got so much plot armor on right now. Like, I was like, he'll maybe get hurt, but I was like, there's no way they're killing Kratos.
I think the other thing that keyed me into Kratos not dying is the fact that Kratos' gear has the most in-depth upgrade options of the three characters that you can essentially play or have as a companion. Like you play as Atreus, but then you also have Freya as a companion. So Atreus and Freya, neither of them in terms of outfits and weaponry are as upgradable as Kratos. So the game wouldn't have you spend that much time and resources and experience points into upgrading this character if they're just going to kill him at the end of the game and you can't then play him in the after, or do it like Horizon does where they reset you to right before the final story plot line. Like that's just like silly.
Yeah.
So
and
like,
that's kind of where I was too. And that's why when you played as Atreus the first time, I was like, we're killing Kratos. Because the first time you play as Atreus, it breaks out a whole bunch of his skill tree that hasn't been there before, since you obviously need more if you're going to play as the character in terms of combos and stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, we're killing Atreus. They'll figure out a way to transmog the armor down to Atreus' size, but it'll be that. And then to your point, from a gameplay perspective, it doesn't get even... the playing as Atreus skill tree doesn't get remotely as deep as Kratos's does.
No, not nearly as much.
And so you kind of ended up in that same place you were, where they're clearly investing too much in Kratos.
It just like they wouldn't, in terms of budget and everything, pay people to develop that much on gameplay for it to just mean very little in the end. So
we're going a bit long because I spent too much time going through the plot, but I do
talk about it,
yeah. I spent too much time going through the summary. I should have bullet pointed some stuff out before we got started, but alas. So let's spend some time on gameplay. What did you think overall of the gameplay in this game, either versus 2018 in specific or compared to other games in general? What did you think of the moment to moment in this one?
Moment to moment, I mean, having come into this game pretty freshly off of God of War 3, I kind of wish there was more big monster hack and slash
Mhm.
stuff. Um, that may just be having played the old one of the older games, like I want it to be a little more gruesome in terms of like, quick time events in taking down this big monster or whatever.
Yeah.
But overall, it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. That's a lot of like I love combat stuff and like button mashing my own combos to pull things down and bring things down. Didn't like the
Mhm.
spear very much.
Let's talk about the spear.
Yeah.
In specific.
But
Um, I'll say similarly. I like. I'm a sucker for give me a human-sized enemy that does human things, um, in games, and so like those are almost always some of my favorite bosses. Like, but I'm definitely with you. One that I, in specific, I want to call out is I wish that we as Kratos would have had to have stopped Surtur or slowed Surtur down. Because, like, when they're trying to, like, delay Ragnarok so that they can save the civilians, and Kratos and Atreus split up. And so that, like, at that point in Ragnarok where you start playing as Atreus, it's like, I really wanted us to play and get to see Kratos try to stop down Surtur from slamming the sword into Asgard and blowing it up. I really wanted to see that. And I think that that would have been like the perfect opportunity for this giant fight. This giant, like, big set piece there. I don't know what that would have done for the pacing because there's already a lot going on in that section. But that's something that I think they could have done. But then I liked a lot of the fights. I like that the Thor fights didn't get nearly as worn out as the Balder fights in the previous game.
yeah.
With him very much serving the same, like, beginning boss and then mostly end boss, like penultimate boss. Um, those fights felt a bit more diverse versus the fights against Boulder that are just like, oh, here we go again.
Yep.
Um,
I absolutely struggled with the boulder fights.
yeah.
And then this time around, it felt like I still struggled, but like I wasn't getting as frustrated
Mm-hmm.
because I knew how to go about it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think other. I what was I gonna say? I like that there was more enemy variety in this one versus the previous one. But I also would have still liked more enemy variety. Like, I think that we can both applaud them for doing more and say it
Yeah.
still would have been nice to have had more.
Especially in comparison to the older games, like
Yeah.
even the third one, like there was a lot of variety in the older God of War games in terms of fights. And that's essentially the source material that they're coming
Mm-hmm.
from in a slightly different context of the
Yeah.
different mythology base. So you can even just reskin some of the Greek stuff as
Mm-hmm.
Norse stuff and have very similar battle schematics or
Mm-hmm.
style or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's probably more difficult than that
Yeah.
in the actual game files or whatever. But you know, older games can do it, so can you.
Yeah. And so with that, what did you already referenced that you did not like the spear. Let's kind of talk about that a little bit. What did you think of Dropnir?
I didn't hate it. It just felt a bit pointless. um, in terms of being a long range weapon for a character that is primarily up close and personal. Like, if I wanted to do wide sweeping attacks to get to get enemies away from me, I'm gonna use the axe to, you know, or the blades to get characters away from me.
Hmm.
Um, Not necessarily a spear that can really only target one enemy at a time.
Yeah.
Like it was useful for those areas that you needed it to locate, but that's the really the only area where I use the spear, especially since it felt like the spear wasn't doing a whole lot of damage.
Yeah. Um, so I'll say for me, the spear grew on me the more I played with it. I basically like forced myself. I was like, they clearly want us to like this spear. I'm going to use the spear for a bit. Uh, my biggest gripe with it was I felt that it wasn't good in boss fights.
Yeah.
This kind of goes back to what you were saying. It felt like it doesn't, or it feels like it doesn't do great damage. Even, I think it's my most maxed out weapon right now. Um,
And
and
it probably
so,
doesn't deal nearly as
yeah,
much damage as the blades or the
right.
axe.
Like I feel like I have the spear at level 8 and then the axe and the blades at level 7, and it still feels like it deals less damage, at least to bosses. But I found myself enjoying it more and more in those one-on-one fights, or not those one-on-ones, the fights that were not one-on-one. Like there's a lot of fun times where like there's the battlefields where there's gaps in it, and it's so easy to get knockback with the spear that it's like enemies would jump over and you would hit them with a spear and they would fall in and die. And it was
Yeah.
like, yes, got them. And then, as Chunk said, the spear made it easier to get the flying ravens.
Yeah.
I really
Like
liked
it's
I liked the out of combat stuff for the
yeah,
spear
yeah,
too.
I was just gonna say it feels like, at least for me, like it felt like it had more use out of combat
Mm-hmm.
rather than in combat. Because I definitely also used it for ravens and things like that. But like that's just where once I get into a routine of playing a game a certain way that I like, I'm gonna keep
Mm-hmm.
playing it that way because it's what works for me. And that the spear just didn't really succeed in terms of the ways that I prefer to play in within fight. So it's just remains mostly a out of combat thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say for me, once you get the ability that I think it's like the sprinting R1 melee attack, where then it leaves the spear at the enemy and then you can then blow it up later. That was when the spear started to like have a turning point for me, because then it
Mm-hmm.
became I can pepper this enemy with spears, run up, stab them from my last one, detonate them, and then switch to melee. And that was kind of like the rhythm that I got into. Um, and Chat Chunk says it felt more like a tool than a weapon. I agree with that. Um,
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to how they develop it. Um, because I do think that whatever we see next for God of War, the spear will play a prominent part. Um, but I'm, yeah, it felt like, again, it grew on me, but it felt like it could definitely have, uh, it didn't live up to the hype of the Leviathan axe versus the Blades of Chaos. So,
Yeah.
and then last gameplay question I have for you. What did you think of playing as Atreus?
But it was fun. It was fun to get that shift in character view, but with a character that you're already familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good to see sort of both sides and both characters. You know, it's a father-son relationship, and you get to
Mm-hmm.
go on the development of that relationship with both characters. Because Atreus is essentially just an angsty teen.
Right.
And I, my two big preferences in, you know, fighting games like this are ranged weaponry and stealth. If I can range and stealth my way through an entire game, I'm going to, because that's what I like to do. And having Atreus be and getting to play that sort of ranged, you know, weaponry character was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
and getting to play around with that a bit, and sort of it changes up the combat style and how you're going to play and approach a scenario. So I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. Uh, I think we talked about this. I could have talked about this with somebody else, but one of the things that really surprised me is I felt way stronger as Atreus than I did as Kratos for specific sections because of the long range gameplay versus being up in enemy's face. Like
Yeah.
feel like I only died once as Atreus. Now, granted, Atreus doesn't go up against nearly as difficult bosses or anything
Yeah.
like that. So like it's a little bit of apples to oranges there. But like in that sense, especially because Atreus's bow feels very like feels much more powerful than the spear for the time when you first get the spear, that like I definitely found myself being like, man, I really wish I could just like hit a button and switch to Atreus to do ranged stuff.
Yep.
And so I really liked it. I wished that even with the expanded skill list, I wish they would have given us more with Atreus. This kind of gets into what you were referencing earlier, where they're spending so much time investing in Kratos' armor and weapons compared to the other people that like it's probably something that they thought would have been cool, but we're not doing in game as Atreus.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something that we're gonna not like. It makes sense that we didn't get, because it's not like you can just be like, oh, I want to go back and play some as Atreus. But I would have liked a bit more depth there. Another weapon, maybe. Like I thought that's what was gonna happen when we get Ingrid. Is like, oh, we now have a sword, but then Ingrid just kind of becomes the companion.
Yeah. They needed a gap to fill there.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have even the dagger. Like they
Yep.
could have had like a small skills tree for the dagger, especially since they gave it this sort of ability to, store a soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is some opportunity there for, like, obviously they must have some plans for future game or games to, like, create a game where you play as Atreus going on this quest to get giant souls, so they might have plans for developing more weapons for that. But for this game specifically, you've already established that he walks around with this dagger.
Yeah.
Like you can throw in a little, skill tree to have him do additional stuff with that.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I think that if we get DLC, as much as I want Kratos dating sim, I do think Atreus out doing whatever this is with giant souls is the logical place to do it.
Yeah. If it's not a game of its own.
Yeah. And so
it would be a DLC.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they do like a Lost Legacy kind of thing, like Uncharted did, where it's the like, here is our DLC plan that ended up being way bigger than we anticipated, and now we have
the
this
second Subnautica game. Also was a similar scenario.
Yeah, and so I hope that's what we get, but we'll see. And then, are you planning to go back, do any more post-game stuff? Do you have any plans to do more with the game now that you have finished the story?
Yes. I would like to keep playing around and doing side quests, and I tend to really only do platinum for games. I've really only done platinum for the Horizon games. So I'm going to revise my statement, because I was going to say I only do platinum for games I really like, and I realized that literally only applies to the Horizon games. I would like to at least sort of check off the side quest boxes and explore the worlds a bit more and attempt a couple of the Berserker graves. But given that I spent all of my video game time over the past month or however long playing this game, I might take a break and play other games for a while first, just to refresh and do something different.
Yeah. So for me, I'm definitely planning on going back. There's a bit more of the story stuff that I want to do in the post game. Like I've rescued the real Tyr, but there's apparently some stuff where he now wanders around the realms, and you can interact with him. Um, and so
That's fun.
that's on my list. I want to go do all of that. I'll be getting the platinum, just because I want to. I really like this game, and so I'm kind of in the as long as it's a pretty much as long as it's a PlayStation first party game and the trophy or the platinum isn't insane, I'm gonna go get the platinum for it. And so this one is not insane. I just got to get through these berserkers, um, and which some of them are definitely going to be rough. Um, but I am enjoying that and looking forward to doing more of it. Um, but yeah, so I'm definitely planning to do post game stuff. I also want to get prepared in case there is DLC. I would like to be done so that when I go into the DLC, I can either have a fully kitted out character or I can just kind of be ready. So
Yeah. Focus on that DLC without having other
yeah.
random things to do.
Yeah, without having to worry about going and killing all the ravens or whatever. So
yeah, I got most of the ravens. I think I only have like 4 left.
Oh, you got more than I did. I think I have 10 left.
Because I tend to because they have an audio, like there's a sound cue for them.
Yeah.
In the environment, and I tend to listen for it and get them when I'm there. Like if I hear it, then I'm gonna get it.
Yeah.
So I listen for that, and I got a good majority of them. I wouldn't move on until I got the raven, but there's definitely some that I missed, obviously. So.
Final question. Stealing this from book club. Any other themes, spiritual otherwise, that stood out to you?
This goes to my favorite quote, which I will just bring in. It is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form. In the sense that was something that I really liked. That goes to sort of spiritual and that whole sense of, Kratos has this whole conversation with, which dwarf was that? I don't remember. One of the dwarves of Brock. Thank you. Where it's just it's like you can be in any physical state, and that's not going to impact. Like it's what matters. It's a nicer way of saying it. What matters is what's on the inside, but in a way that is actually focusing on how you interact with the world and what you choose to do with yourself is the important thing, and not how you look or how the world perceives you. Because how the world perceives you is going to be influenced by how you interact with the world. And that was a whole moment and conversation that really, because he then brings that back to later on and is just I know you're suffering, I know your brother is dead, but how are you going to move forward with this information and with this event, given all of that?
As we discussed throughout, a thing that is, pretty obvious, is that, and it comes from this quote, fate only binds you if you let it. Do what is necessary, not what is written. This idea kind of becomes the mantra of the second half of the game, as we've kind of referenced throughout this, that the idea that there isn't fate, it is just people living, and people are predictable. And so if you should do what you think is right, not what you think will or will not fulfill a prophecy. And so I liked that theme, especially when dealing with things like Norse and Greek characters, who are obviously very concerned about fate. And then,
very concerned.
Yeah. And then the final one I want to talk about was this idea of our action. And another quote is, our actions have consequences. To be reminded of them is not punishment. And I kind of liked this. There's a specific quote later on with Kratos talking to Thor that I can't remember the exact quote for, but it kind of hits on this same idea that like who you are or what you've done doesn't define you. It is what you choose to do. And seeing the mistakes that you've made in your past is not a punishment. Like your actions, there are consequences for whatever it is that you've done, but that doesn't mean you can't go past them. And that obviously ties in with this idea of grace and forgiveness, not just for other people, but also for ourselves. That there is that importance of saying, hey, I know who I am. I know the mistakes that I've made, but I need to live past them so that I can grow as a person. So with that, any final thoughts to close us out?
Fun game. Fun game, not my favorite game, but not the worst game ever. Well done. Well done. All of my complaints are stuff me being nitpicky in the sense of I have some pet peeves, and the nitpicky things about this game are things that lean a little bit into my pet peeves as a storyteller. So, otherwise, it's a good game. Like, I don't think it's a bad game by any means, and any awards it gets are well deserved. But I just recommendation wise would recommend it, but I would recommend it with the tag of it's a good game, but not the best I've ever played.
Yeah, for me, definitely recommend.
I'm just gonna say, sorry, interrupt. Chunk, you know what my game of the year is.
Yeah.
You know that Elden Ring is the wrong answer.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I'm very torn tying this in with the idea of Game of the Year talks, like the conversations between this and Elden Ring. Very torn. I love where the story in this game went. The gameplay, I do feel like was very well done, but I feel like kind of dealt with being a bit more of, it felt very samey, and then the things like the spear that were new didn't feel as fresh as I would have liked. But overall, really enjoy it. Definitely recommend, especially if you liked God of War 2018, or if you're like me and you always thought Kratos was a boring character. You should go and play God of War 2018 and then play this, because it turns out that he has some awesome character development. And so definitely recommend there. But that is going to wrap up our thoughts on God of War Ragnarok. You can find us as OneGeek411 on our social media. You can join our Discord server if you want to let us know what you thought about God of War Ragnarok. Just use those spoiler tags. And then you can also send us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com, or check out our Redbubble store. I got those confused and I almost said gbubble.com. That's why I had to catch myself. You can watch live on Twitch and find the videos over on YouTube. And then if you would like, you can find us on our personal social media. Mine is Humar Whittill.
Mine is I am not prepared with an I on all platforms.
And it's been a great week.
Drink some water.
I love you. Okay, so we gotta be